circumstances behind making of We the Living were really unusual. It was wartime Italy, a lot of limitations on how something could be filmed, a lot of political considerations as to even what movies were chosen to be made. And certainly it was even more interesting with We the Living. The book had been published in Italy, and from what we're told, it was a very popular book. The idea to do We the Living was first suggested by the daughter of Scalera, the person who the studio was named after.
She read the book, she enjoyed it, and she said, I will not speak of it to my father because he will not perhaps understand the kind of story I love. But you, Massimo, you are close to my age. I believe that you will like it. I read, and I must admit, I said it's a fantastic story. It was a different story from all other love stories, because, of course, there was also a political situation.
The fascists ruled the movie industry as they really did every industry in Italy. It had to be approved for the movie to go into production. And people who were concerned about this, the theme of the book were assured that it was not going to be a problem and it could be filmed in a way that it wouldn't be offensive to the fascist regime there. And in the height of irony, Mussolini's son, who was in the movie industry, actually was one of the people that advocated for making this movie. Italy was at war with the United States, and it was not even possible to get literary rights from Ayn Rand to make a movie version of We the Living. So they decided to go ahead and make the movie anyway, without any literary rights. And so they started production on a movie that was basically Ayn Rand's life story, her own. It was so heavily drawn from her own personal experience. And it was her book. And she wasn't even aware that the movie was being made, much less have any say in how the movie was being made.
I must admit, Alessandrini was in that moment at the top of his career. Therefore, I believe that his choice was also a guarantee for the success of the picture.
They cast Alida Valli, although she had not appeared in many other movies. She had made quite a big impact. It was felt she was perfect for that part. Rossano Brazzi had done a handful of movies and was quite popular, but had not done many serious dramatic roles. They were, up to that point, they were mainly kind of swashbuckling action pictures. And Fosco Giacchetti was quite a major star. Probably you could consider him more the John Wayne of Italy, the virile leading man. The director, Alessandrini, was away shooting another film when the original script was being written for We the Living. And the original screenwriters had decided to be very creative with Ayn Rand's book. And they decided that instead of Kira being an engineer who only believes in steel and numbers, that she was instead going to be a ballerina. And they made a number of other changes like that. And when the director Alessandrini came back and looked at the script, even though they were scheduled to start filming pretty much right away, he said, this script is hopeless. I don't even want it rewritten. We're going to just start from scratch again. So they quickly started work on another script, but the actors were hired, the sets were built, they were ready to go. And so they started filming, and literally scenes for the movie were being written as the movie was being filmed. And the new writers were going through the book and just literally lifting the scenes out of the book. And in a way, that actually was very fortunate, because a lot of the scenes ended up being very faithful to the book. They hired a lot of expatriate Russians to be extras in the movie. So to a large degree, there's a very authentic look to the background actors in the movie. Some of these Russians were also hired to do some of the artwork and art direction of the film. So the posters and the banners and so forth were more authentic thanks to that.
Of course, you have to consider also that the reconstruction in Italy of a Russian atmosphere, of the setups was something which requested a lot of time of preparation and a long period of shooting.
The thing people also should keep in mind is that this movie was made during wartime Italy, and it was very difficult to shoot exterior scenes. And it was often the nature of movie making anyway to shoot exterior scenes inside. And you could control light and other things that were very difficult to do back then by just shooting everything inside. So what was quite interesting is that all the scenes in We the Living were actually shot inside a soundstage in Rome, even snow-covered streets with a horse-drawn sleigh going through the scene. It was recognized by some very early on that this theme in the movie was as much an indictment of fascism as it was of communism. And the fact that that had been made in a studio under the control of the fascists was quite an amazing thing to happen. Throughout the filmmaking, the authorities kept a very close eye on this movie because of that concern. And the screenwriter of the movie, who we were fortunate enough to interview while he was still alive, told stories about the authorities coming to the editing room almost on a daily basis to look at the dailies and to see, just what had been filmed and whether there was going to be any problem with it. And the editors would typically hide away some of the scenes and not show it to these authorities. But, they knew typically how much of a movie is shot each day, and so they'd often say, "Is that all there is? Isn't there anything else? That's all you shot yesterday?" Rossano Brazzi was against the fascist regime, as were many Italians. We the Living was the last movie that he appeared in before going underground, and he worked with the resistance in Italy right after We the Living was finished.
I have to say that the picture was accepted as a masterpiece, both by the public and by the critics. It was difficult for our theater owners to have good pictures to show. There were no American pictures, of course, no English, no French pictures. Therefore, there were only German and Italian pictures. You can imagine.
It's been described as being like the Gone with the Wind of Italy for that time period. The movie everybody had to go see. There were literally people naming their children Kira or Andre or after the characters in the movie. People would talk about it in the streets. And there was kind of a winking going on too, because they knew the movie was taking digs at the government, and it was a very difficult time in Italy, and there was a lot of shortages of food and supplies and so forth. And this is what the characters in the movie were experiencing. So the public could relate to what was going on in this movie very, very closely, and they could take it to heart.
They were calling it in a humorist, tragic way, instead of We the Living, We the Dead. Instead of goodbye Kira, goodbye Lira, our money is disappearing, depreciating every day. I received at the Scalera Studios an injunction formally saying that the picture was prohibited and all the materials had to be delivered to the police because the picture was to be banned. And the obligation to appear before a kind of special court, which was the directory of the National Fascist Party, to explain why such a picture was made. They said, how can you forget what is our climate, our situation in war? Number one, the fact that you are the general manager of Scalera Studios. Since today, you are no more. And also for your university career, you can no more lecture. You are not entitled to speak to the students because you are a dangerous person. The police went to every motion picture theater and seized the picture. It was said that they were going to put in the fire all the prints.
It was taken out of all the theaters. Any further release in other countries was halted. The only reason that We the Living survive World War II is that the producers of the movie, knowing that the film and the negatives were being sent in to be destroyed, they hid away the original negative of the film in the basement of somebody's home, and they sent in the negative of another movie that they didn't care about. And the authorities destroyed that negative, not knowing that it wasn't actually We the Living.
I had a man I entrusted very much, whose name was Franco Magli. And I told him, please bring to your house, put in wherever you wish, in a cemetery, the negative.
That the movie would have been totally lost forever had they not done that. Now, Ayn Rand was very unhappy that obviously her book and her life story had been made into a movie without any discussion with her, without any rights being granted by her, and without any monies being paid to her. And the movie had been quite successful in Italy, and she'd never seen a dime. And years after the war, she put in a claim that eventually ended up being decided by the Italian government, claiming reparations for the losses she incurred by this movie being released. And it was not a very grand sum, but it was more in principle that she pursued this.
When the war was over, and they told me, now you need to have a license agreement with the copyright owner. The first persons who tried to contact Ayn Rand were just the stars, Alida Valli and Rossano Brazzi, and I delivered them a copy of the picture to have them to show it to Ayn Rand.
And what did they say was her reaction?
They told me that Ayn Rand was very pleased. And this was for me a reason of joy.
And the film basically at that point started to fall into obscurity. Legally it couldn't be re-released, so it was stored away. The Scalera Films that had made the movie eventually went out of business.
Among the other goods which were sold, the stock of the motion picture produced by Scalera Film were around 90 pictures were sold.
So the movie really ended up in storage, pretty much unseen for many, many years until Henry Mark Holzer and Erica Holzer, lawyers for Ayn Rand, they had been working with Ayn Rand, they heard about the movie and decided that they wanted to go find this movie.
She said from the very beginning that it was a pretty good film and it needed work. She had seen a copy, she had seen a print of the film that Rossano Brazzi apparently had come by after the war and screened for her in Los Angeles. And she spoke well of it.
She wasn't just satisfied with it, she was, thought it was really quite exciting, and that I think she said she liked it better in terms of how it was done than The Fountainhead.
At that point, I asked her where it was, and she explained she didn't know. And I asked her what would happen if Eric and I somehow turned this thing up. And she said, oh, well, then what we'll do is we'll restore it and release it. I began making inquiries to film people in Italy and networking and asking people who knew other people. And this went on for maybe 2 years. But I got a letter at some point from somebody there who said they maybe knew somebody who maybe knew something about the film. So I finally zeroed in on an individual there, and he said, the Italian said, "Oh, noi vivi, addio Kira," which is, of course, the names they knew it by. "Oh, yeah, we have this film." And Eric and I talked about it a lot, and we made plans, and finally arranged to meet these people, and went to Italy. We met them for lunch. We're sitting on a terrace with these two guys, and they pull out this list of maybe 150 films. And he said, we own all these films. I said, well, where did you get them? He said, well, we bought the film library from Scalera, which was the producer of We the Living, as well as a lot of other films. And lo and behold, somewhere, page 5, 6, or 8, wherever it was, Noi Vivi and Addio Kira.
And so then we went into this screening room, and they put it up.
And it was that voting scene, the student election at the college, voti, voti, voti.
He was glued to the screen, and I remember literally bursting into tears.
But what happened next is, I said, these are two reels, what's the rest? They said, well, we have this negative. Now, I said to him, well, how do I know that you have it all? They said, well, you can look at it. So they put it up on a viewer, and I went through literally every frame of that negative to make sure that everything that I remembered from the book was there, and it was.
She was happy with the movie overall. She was quite happy with the movie overall. I remember her saying that the character of Andre was cast with a much older actor than she had envisioned when she wrote the book, but that she felt that Fosco Giacchetti was very, very good, and she was very happy and felt that even his older age really worked well for Andre. There was a lot of comments about how pretty Rossano Brazzi looked in the movie. Everyone was blown away by Alida Valli's performance and felt it was extremely powerful. We had several sessions that followed where it was basically Ayn Rand and mainly myself going through the movie scene by scene, making determinations as to what could be changed and how it could be changed.
Vuoi dire Leo?
The main storyline of We the Living had been done very well, and she was very happy about that, the triangle between Leo, Andre, and Kira. And so the decision was made that the movie would really stick to that main core storyline, and we'd eliminate most of the subplot.
Andrei Taganov.
It was Ayn Rand's wish that certain scenes be taken out of the movie that had been gratuitously put in by the fascist authorities that oversaw the Italian filmmaking industry during World War II. And they had required that certain propaganda speeches be added to the script. They stood out like a sore thumb. Ayn Rand very justifiably was very unhappy with these added scenes. In several cases, the characters said things totally the opposite of what the character had been saying previously in the film, especially the character of Andre. One of the things that was decided was that it would no longer be released as two films, that we would combine it. It would be a long film. It ended up being 2 hours and 50-something minutes. But that seemed a manageable length to release it as one movie. Again, we have a movie that was made without her permission, without her input, that was about her own life, and she had no say in it. And we wanted to go to whatever lengths were necessary to basically right that wrong. It's been a labor of love for most of my adult life, actually, as it turned out. It's touched so many people. Its message is so important. I can't be prouder of any project that I've worked on than this one.
I loved the picture. For me, it was a creature of mine,
The movie is very close to your heart.
of course. It's the most important picture I made in my life, the one I love more.
This was a moral imperative that this film be found, rescued, restored, and stand for the novel she wrote. And she says it, and I think almost a direct quote is that this is as close to an autobiography as I will ever write. And one can see, I think, in the character of Kira, a lot of Ayn Rand, of course. The independence and the unwillingness to live under communism, the moral battles the character had to wage, the outspokenness, the fearlessness. I mean, you're seeing much, much of Ayn Rand